Hey, everybody, welcome to Breakfast All Day. Alonso here with Matt and Christy. Matt and Christy have seen No Man's Land. I have not. So I'm going to let Matt explain this whole thing to you.
Yeah, No Man's Land is a Western that gets the title wrong because there's a bunch of men in it. Apart from that, it's the story
Mistake number
about
one.
the Greer family who lives on their ranch. Frank Grillo is their father. Andie MacDowell is their mother, and Jake Allyn, who also wrote this movie, is Jackson Greer, the youngest son of the Greer family. His brother is played by Alex McNichol, and Jake's character is the youngest, and he's got a really good baseball arm. He's a really good pitcher, it seems, and he's got a chance to go play Double-A ball in New York and maybe actually make it all the way up to the Yankees. And what that means is, as there's, some of the more dangerous farm work to be done, they all kind of baby him, and he resents it. And in fact, he doesn't even want to leave the farm. He wants to stay on the ranch and ranch for a living. That's what he loves. Meanwhile, there's this other story about a guy called the Shepherd, who, El Pastor, who helps would-be immigrants cross the border into Texas. And he's very much not a coyote. He actually takes care of his people. This particular trip, he's taking his sons along. And as the movie progresses, there's a showdown on the ranch as the Greers are trying to get their cattle back, and they run across these immigrants, and push comes to shove, literally, and their shots are fired, and older brother Lucas ends up shot in the stomach, and El Pastor's son ends up shot by what's his name? Jackson, and killed, which doesn't sit right with Jackson. Jackson ends up going on the lam, wanders around Mexico, and starts to learn more about Mexico than he thought he knew. This movie is beautifully shot, for one thing, and I think there's some issues with the script, but for the most part, I kind of was along for this movie. I know Christy didn't like it as much as me. It's very much, yeah. So Jake Allen wrote this script, and
he co-wrote it,
and I think that it could definitely use a few more drafts. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a kernel of something interesting there, because one of the things I thought that Allen does as an actor is he kind of captures the kind of, despair and kind of horror after Jackson has killed this kid, and he kind of loses himself for a while. Now, the journey he goes on in a couple places, it's like, what's going on here? But I think that the direction works for what they have going on. I think the cast is pretty solid. And again, the cinematography in this movie is stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. And that kind of helps. Like, nobody's bad in this. I just think that, and it's not like there's terrible dialogue. It's just that the script goes in a couple of directions and adds some things that I think are unnecessary. But for the most part, I like this. Although, like, the big bad in this, the coyote is like, came out of a different, like, seems like it was an extra villain from the Rambo movie where he goes south of the border.
He's super cartoonishly evil. Yeah. This has some similarities to The Marksman, which we just talked about. There's a confrontation at the border. The name takes itself from, there's a section of land between the Rio Grande and the border fence. And that is where this family's ranch is. Again, if I may nitpick, Jackson speaks no Spanish. He's lived his entire life on the Mexico border. And then I guess he goes to Texas A&M. He's wearing an A&M sweatshirt, and they refer to that at some point.
That didn't bother.
What the fuck? How do you not learn any Spanish?
When Christy and I lived in Dallas in the 80s and 90s, at the grocery store, at the checkout stand, there was a little booklet that was basically like enough Spanish to speak to your housekeeper and or gardener. I'm not kidding. Every time I went to the grocery store, I would see this thing. People know the rudiments of the language, especially if they're on the fucking border.
They're right there. Anyway, this bothers me so greatly.
I think we're looking at this through a cosmopolitan lens. Like
we've lived in Texas, Matt.
Okay.
For 7 years, Matt.
Okay.
I was in a bubble in Highland Park. The DP, by the way, is a Mexican cinematographer named Juan Pablo Ramirez. I agree. There are some very strikingly lovely images here. And it's an interesting kernel of an idea, as you say, because it is a reverse immigration story. And it's about this, it feels novel in that regard, but it also has like the stuff of classic Westerns of a desperate man on the run who goes south of the border to hide, to flee, to hide, to protect himself from some awful deed he's done. And so there is an interesting idea that they're trying to get at now, right? And to see through this guy's eyes, because he learns about Mexican culture, and he does pick up a little bit of the language. He learns to curse, which is always helpful. And to see through fresh eyes a people in a culture that has been so vilified and misunderstood these past several years among xenophobic rhetoric about building a wall. I mean, it certainly does not hurt to have that kind of story. I wish it were told with some more nuance. I wish it were told by filmmakers with a little more finesse, like a little more experience, to handle these ideas in a way that isn't so heavy-handed, that isn't so literal. I mean, quite literally, at one point, Jackson's on the phone saying, Mexico's different than I thought it was. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. And I'm like, really? Like, he's in trouble and he's he finds a payphone and this is what he says on the phone. Like it felt a stronger filmmaker would have indicated that without saying those words verbatim, is my point.
For those of you in the back.
Right. But what I did like is that as he flags down the truck for help that happens to be carrying a horse trailer and they put him to work. And I didn't find anything cliched about that whole sequence as he's working on that farm. And then, he kind of runs into that old couple and like, there's not much to what's going on, but I think that the movie for the most part, like sidesteps the idea of like, it doesn't fall in like the big cliched character is the coyote, right? Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I felt like it did a pretty solid job of avoiding the cliches everywhere else. And where I think the movie lets itself down is that, Allyn's dialogue for himself is the weakest part in there. And this had the potential to be this really stunning exploration of grief on behalf of both Jackson and El Pastor.
He's good, by the way.
And he's really good. And it hints at that, right? Like that, there's the scene, that elevator scene the elevator scene goes in a direction I didn't expect. And I'm so glad it went there. And that was momentarily terrifying. Yeah. Because we know more than those characters.
Right.
Right. And I think that there's a lot going on in this movie. And like, I will say this, like, I'm interested in seeing the Allyn brothers do something else because I think they've shown that they have got a lot of potential here and they pick something that's really complicated and they don't completely drop the ball. Like they make it work. It could be a lot better, but the movie doesn't fail. Like, I feel like it's okay.
It's okay. I mean, you have this really great cast between Frank Grillo and Andie MacDowell, and then George Lopez is the Texas Ranger who's chasing after Jackson across the border, and none of them really gets a whole lot to do. That feels a bit wasteful. I want to mention, the actor who plays the dad, the grieving dad, Gustavo, is Jorge A. Jimenez, and I thought he was very good, and he gets some moments of sensitivity. It's got its moments here and there, and the whole section where he goes and like spends time at the ranch and starts like training the horses at the Mexican ranch, like that's an interesting movie. Like that had some glimmers of like the Mustang to me, and there's hope for me there. Like, this allows this character to reveal his personality and he comes to life there in a way. So I'm watching
it. I couldn't help but think like, boy, that kid from The Writer's a lot better at this.
True, because he really doesn't. But like, there are glimmers of like interesting ideas and images here, and it doesn't it came together for you. It did not come together for me. I'm mixed on
these
it.
Guys, but I hear you. I think these guys have, at the risk of sounding like that guy, these guys have a good future in front of them. They got a lot of potential. I hope they live up to it.
Well, their father was a longtime political consultant in Dallas and took his kids across the border to Mexico quite a bit as they were growing up. And so they saw a side of Mexico that you don't always see in film and television. And then they wanted to convey that. And that was the idea with this. So the intentions are definitely there, right? The nugget is definitely there. I wish it had been handled with a little more finesse. So I'm saying 5.4.
I'm saying 7.
Okay. Our number is a 6.2. And No Man's Land is out today. Is it streaming?
It is streaming. Yes. It's on Amazon and Vudu and wherever you can rent and buy movies online.
Okay.
Cool. All righty. Well, hey, thanks for watching. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us at BeFastAllDay on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. Exciting week, because in addition to our usual recaps of Bridgerton and WandaVision, we're going to be doing a film that our subscribers picked for us, a classic, namely 1962's brilliant political thriller, The Manchurian Candidate. So check that out, won't you? And thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.